Welcome back to Level Construction. In this video, Logan's going to wrap up the remainder of the decoration static meshes.
Alright, what we're going to do is take a look at the other room, the big slime room. We're going to start by adding some pillars over behind these girder pieces, just to fill in this open space behind these structural meshes. So what we'll do is we'll load up the static mesh browser, and we'll look for, I believe it's
LT support.
Yeah, LT support. Let's scroll down to some of the organic pillar section, and we'll grab the very first one, Org Pillar 02. So I'll grab that mesh, and I'll go all the way to the floor and drop one in. Then I'll go and look in a top view, and let's scale this whole mesh up because it's kind of small to fill that area. So we'll bump its scale up to maybe 2, and then slide it back just a little bit, kind of center it up. And that's looking, let's see, slide it back. Oh no, that's looking pretty good. Maybe just a little bit more, something like that. Now let's see what we're doing, or how this is looking for height. It looks like we need another one to match the height of the ceiling, so let me drag. And before I do, I'm going to jump my drag grid up to something higher, maybe 8, just since this is almost covering the entire height of the level here. So let me drag this up to duplicate and zoom in, and I have no idea where that other one is, so I'll very quickly grab both of these pillars, show only the pillars, and then I can quickly see that that's what we need to do for sticking them together. So let's bring everything back and see how this is looking. Now the only thing I don't like about this alignment is the top one just sticks straight through the ceiling. So what I'll do is I'll grab both of them, and then I'll slide them down until the top mesh is stuck just to the ceiling. So scroll in to verify, and there we go. Because what I like about that is that way we see this nice beveled piece at the top. Now the bottom of it sticks through the floor, but I'm not as worried about that since this is all going to be covered in slime. So no one's going to be looking at this too closely because they'll be too busy getting killed by the slime. But I think that's looking good for one pillar. So with both of those still selected, let me start duplicating them off to the sides. So we've got another kind of open space over in this corner, and then one more space on the other side. So we'll fill all of those in with this pillar mesh. I'll slide that over, and I didn't mean to deselect it, so let me just jump in here in perspective real quick, grab both of them, and slide them over. So that's looking pretty good. We can even slide it over just a little bit more to kind of center it up on the two rooms there, since it kind of falls right in between those two rooms where that one glass wall is. So that looks kind of nice. Alright, next thing to take a look at is the 2 generators. These generators will be placed right in front of these walkways, but their height is going to be dependent on the height of the slime itself. So before I can place the generators, I need to place the slime sheet, the brush that will carry the slime material, so I can get an idea of exactly where the generators need to be placed. And before I create that sheet, I want to load up its necessary material in the generic browser. So I'm going to open up the package Unliquid 2. Here we've got Unliquid 2. Let's load that in, and let's also show material items so that we can see the material in Unliquid 2. The first one is SM Biowaste, and that'll work very nicely for slime. Alright, next thing I need to do is pull up a sheet builder brush and then bring up its properties. We're going to give this dimensions of 1024 by 1024. Then let me scroll way out so that I can see how it should line up in this room. Let me drag it over, zoom in, and align it up to this one corner. And that should have us align nicely to fill the area of the room. Now I'm going to jump to probably either a front or side. I think side will work in this case. And drag this brush down until it just touches the very bottoms of the walkways. I want to keep the slime level very close to the level of the walkway, since the player is going to need to be able to climb back out of the slime if they fall in. And the closer they are to the walkways, the easier that will be. So I'm going to line that. The walkways will actually dip very slightly into the slime, but that'll be hard to tell. So I'm going to leave them right at that level. And it might be nice to drop it maybe one below, but I'm actually going to put it stuck as close to the walkways.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know. Up underneath it, there could be supports that are bolted all the way down to the floor, and they may be slime corrosion resistant or something.
Right, right. So with this placed here, let me go and add this in. So I'll do Control A, add in this new sheet, and then we're pretty much done with the builder brush, so I could drag it out of the way and see what this is looking like. So Now I've got a nice layer of slime, and you can still kind of see under the walkway. It's still like the walkway is built right over the level of the slime. And now that we know where the slime goes, we can place the generator and its relevant supports. So let's go find the generator mesh. That should be an HU Deco 5, and let me also turn off materials, because now I want to go back to just seeing static meshes. So let's grab HU Deco 5 and scroll down, and we have motor 01, motor 01 underscore 01. I'm going to grab the second one, and we'll add that in right above the slime. And since I'm not sure where that is, I'll just add it in a top view. So I'll add actor, machine, and center it up a little bit. Now it's kind of small for that area, so let me bump its scale up to 2. And that fits a lot better. And after that, let me just kind of move it around a little bit to get it to center up. I want to make sure that it's centered along the center line of the walkway. And other than that, just moved off the edge enough to be right up against the back of the support system. Now, in order to get the height for this mesh, I need to have its support in place. So let me jump over to the LT Deco package in the static mesh browser, and let me look for a good support mesh. So if we scroll down, there's the podium scorpion mesh. Should work nicely here. And I'll add it in the top view as well, just so that it's a little bit easier to line up. So let me center it, and its default scale is working nicely for our scaled up generator. And what I want to do now is find the level of the slime, which it looks like it's resting directly on the slime. Let me find, maybe a front view will help out with this. And it is resting directly on it. What I want to do is move it up maybe, we've got a drag grid of 8 currently. Either 8 or 16 units. Let me go with 8 for the time being. Just pull it up 8 units off the ground. Now let's see how that's looking. I think that's looking pretty good. Now we know where to put the generator mesh, so we can snap it down just to the very top. And let me show only both of these meshes just for a second so I can see that our snapping distance is there. Bring everything back. And now I want to add one final piece to the support so that if anyone does jump into the slime and sees this area, add some mesh to fill in this empty space so it looks like there's something holding up the generator support. So let me jump back into the static mesh browser, and still in LT Deco, let me grab the steam vent again, the SM Vento 1 mesh. And I'll add it in the top view as well, right next to the generator. And it's going to need to be scaled up a little bit. Let me see where this is lining up over here. As a matter of fact, let me also, for the time being, hide some stuff out. So I'll grab the generator, the support, and that new steam vent, show only these actors, and now it should be easier to line everything up, because I can go ahead and center this guy up. And if we go and jump below it, let's see, we're looking at the bottom of it there. So let me scale it -1 in Z, so we can see the bottom and point that side down. Then we can snap it to the underside of the support and scale it up. First, let's scale it up overall, maybe to about 5. It scales out to the side, and that's not quite enough to make it to the edge, so maybe 5.5, and that's looking good. Now, I also want to scale it up a lot more in Z so that it reaches the floor. Maybe if we hit a scale of maybe -5. That almost reaches, maybe -5.5. Closer, maybe -5.6. Alright, maybe
-5.8.
Yeah, let's try that. 5.8. Almost, but so close that, I mean, we could almost call it there.
I just give it -6 for the whole thing.
-6.
And yeah.
And there, that's close enough. Alright. Let's bring all of our other meshes back and see what this is looking like. Let me see, the generator mesh kind of has these things on the front that are sticking off of it a little bit. I don't know if I'll worry about those too much. I could move the entire thing.
They could be little drains that simply drain out to the slime.
Right. More importantly, let me look at how these are connecting here. We've got this mesh connecting into the floor piece, and I kind of like the level that it's doing that at, because that way it looks like it just kind of blends in.
Yeah, and it looks like there's a reason for that catwalk to be there. You're going to walk up to it to service it.
It looks like it plugs into it. We've kind of got the 2 little pipe lines on the side that run into it, so I think that's looking pretty nice. So with those 3 pieces in place, I could grab all of them and duplicate them to the other side. So we'll go into a top view and drag them over. Let me zoom in a little bit so I can make sure that I center this up along with that walkway. And then it's still fitting very nicely into that half circle of meshes. And it looks like it fits very nicely into this catwalk as well.
Very nice.
So I think that takes care of the 2 generators for this room.
Cool.
So the next thing we want to look at are some vents to place along this empty wall over on the side, maybe even one above this doorway. Now the vent mesh I'm going to use is inside of the LT Floors package. If we give it a second to load up LT Floors, we should have maybe near the top more. Let's scroll up a little bit. And there we have SM Duct 01. Let's grab that mesh. And let's add it to one of the walls over here on the side. And it's aligned so that it would point into the floor. So I'm going to need to rotate that just a little bit to get it moved around. Let's see, the vents kind of point down off in this direction. So I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees to get it lined up. And then 90 degrees again so that it plugs into the wall. So I'll rotate it around something like that. And then looking at it, it's already aligned on the wall pretty nice, but we don't see any of the fins of the grating. That's because they're all being kind of hidden into the wall. So in order to make this mesh really look nice, I'll need to add in, I'll need to cut out of this wall a little bit. But before I get into editing any of the BSP, let me place the vent meshes themselves and get a general idea of where I want them to be located. I want one along that wall, or one along that side, one along the right side, and I want to center them up somewhat, so let me do a little bit of measuring. Let me see, if we drag from this side, we have a major grid line at about 256, so let's try to line up to that. On that side, 256 on this side is a little bit too far. I should probably drop my drag grid a little bit for measuring, but let me get that. And there's another major grid line, so let's slide off to the side here. That's kind of putting the meshes a little bit too far out to the side, so let me pull them in maybe 16 units in on that side, and maybe 16 like that. That kind of evens it up a little bit. Let me also duplicate this mesh over to the other wall above the doorway. So we'll drag this down just above the other doorway, rotate it around so that it fits into the wall, and make sure it centers up on the door, and move it forward so that the edges hit the wall where they're supposed to. Now let's see, let's actually, maybe we'll not center it up on the door, we'll center it up on the open space above the door. Now another interesting thing is the fact that it looks like this one will have to be scaled down just a little bit in order to fit. As a matter of fact, I kind of want to take it down maybe to, it looks like I want to take it down about 32 units off the top and bottom, but I'll need to measure if I'm going to find what 32 units should be represented as in scale. So let me hide everything except the mesh and measure, and we get a height of about 272. So let's see what kind of scale we would need. If we took 272 and take away 32 units, would give us 240. So how do we turn 272 into 240? Well, we could divide 240 by 272, giving us a scale of 0.88 and a lot of numbers. So let's plug that into draw scale in Z. And Z is the wrong way. Oh, if you remember, this mesh was supposed to be pointing out at the floor, so we scaled it in on the wrong side. Let's set that back to 1. And let's take a quick peek at its local rotation axis, and we can see there that it's actually Y that we would need to adjust if we want to adjust its height. So we'll plug that number into Y, bring all of our meshes back, move the mesh up just a little bit, and there it centers nicely into the wall, out of the way of the door.
Very nice.
Alright, now let's take a look at editing the BSP a little bit so we can cut out this area that's hiding all of the fins for the mesh. So let me grab a cube builder brush, and let's scale it in. Let's actually bring up its properties. Let's take its Y down to 32. So we have a brush of 256 by 32 by 256. And then center that up on this one mesh here. And let me grab the builder brush instead of the mesh. So we'll deselect everything and control drag. Pull that in a little bit on that side. It looks like it needs to be wider. But in order to fit the shape, I know I'm going to need to edit the vertices a little bit. So I'll worry about that here in a minute in geometry mode. For now, I just want to get the general shape correct. So let's grab something like that, maybe. And, thinking about it, I'd rather edit one of these meshes first, because if you remember, we had scaled this one a little bit, so it'll be hard to match up. Let me actually bring the cube builder back up. I'm going to scale on, let me do 32 in X and 256 in Y. And let's slide over to here. We know we're not going to worry about exact spacing just yet. And let's subtract that out of the wall. And looking at it, before I do that, I had no material selected when I did that subtraction. Let me actually delete that brush out and rebuild. The reason being is that I would rather have this concrete material selected beforehand. So an easy way to select it would be to grab any face that has the material applied, sync it in the generic browser. That will have that material selected. Then we can go back in and create the brush with the correct material selected. So let's subtract that out. If we look at the sides now, we can see that we have the concrete texture instead. We also have an interesting problem, though, is that we've just punched a hole out into space, which would be a lovely Hall of Mirrors effect if we were to play right now. But we know that there's going to be some editing in size in general, so let's jump in here. Let's first fix the problem of this going too far out into space. I'll do that by dropping my drag grid down to 4, going into geometry mode, and grabbing the outer 2 vertices and dragging them in just 4 units, just off the edge. And that way, if we build geometry now we can't see out into space anymore. And the idea is that these slats should hide and block enough of the lighting that these faces should appear nice and dark, so we can't see up into the grating at all. We do have a few things left to address, though, and that is the shape of this square brush is not matching our beveled edges of the grating very well. So we have these bad-looking triangles on the sides. It's also not fitting out to the extents. So let me do a little bit of vertex manipulation to get this brush to fit a little bit better. First, we'll slide the side vertices out so that they match. Then I'll go into a front view, which isn't going to be very useful at the moment. So let me grab the brush and the static mesh, show only those things, and then it'll be a lot easier to line everything up. So now I can see that, for starters, we need to move the entire thing down somewhat. And now to correct the problem where we have these triangles on the side, looking at it, it almost looks like these slats are represented by that square edge inside the mesh. So it's really like we could take the vertices all the way back to there on both sides, and then not have to worry about the problem with the triangles on the top. Let me zoom in here.
Maybe a little bit anyways.
Yeah, they need to be dropped down just a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll select the vertices on the top, drop them down till they're just inside the mesh. And it looks like it's actually above the slats anyway, because there we have the contour of that top piece. So we're still good. We still have the entire area cut out for the little slat pieces. Let me catch the bottom vertices as well, because they're kind of sticking out of the mesh. So we'll drag them up, maybe to about there, where they're just inside the mesh. Rebuild geometry, and
looks nice.
All that's looking really nice. All right, let me bring all of the meshes back. Let me jump back into camera mode now, and let me duplicate this brush to the other vents. So we'll zoom out a little bit. Let me see if I can get away with turning my drag grid back up to 8. And then we'll duplicate and drag over here. And we can
right there.
Align very nicely to the slats on that side. And then duplicate again. This time we'll rotate so that it fits the vent on the adjacent wall. Zoom back in, and we'll line this brush up. So there's the sides, there's back into the wall. Now if we remember though, this brush had a little bit of scaling applied, so if we build now, we'll have 2 problems. One, it doesn't look like it's aligned perfectly, and 2, it's too tall. So let me grab a side view, the subtractive brush, and the mesh itself, and show only those actors, and then we'll vertex edit this brush until it fits. It looks like the top is doing well, but the bottom needs to be fixed up a little bit to fit inside the mesh. So maybe just inside the corners there will work. So let's jump back into camera mode, show all of our actors, and build geometry. So there we've got all of those looking nice, looking good. And that's looking really nice for the vent meshes.
Cool.
So let's see. Well, next, let's drop down to the lower level in this room, and we've got the level below that also has a bunch of barren walls. So let me find a nice wall panel piece to cover those. Let me jump into the LT Walls package inside of the Static Mesh browser, and let me turn off all resource types and select just Static Meshes. So here in LT Walls, we should have a Tech Panel 01. I think that will work nicely. Actually, let me grab Tech Panel 01 small. So let me grab this mesh and let's apply it to this first open area of the wall. And it looks like it'll need to be rotated a little bit, so let's slide that around until it snaps nicely onto the wall. Maybe move it down a little bit and probably scale it out a little. Let's see, looking at this, I'll jump into local for just a minute to make sure I get the right scale. So it looks like we need to scale up in X. So I grab the scale, draw scale in X, maybe 1.5, maybe even more, 1.8. Slide that into the side. Maybe back a little right there. And maybe we could even scale up in Z a little bit, maybe 1.2. That's a little bit much, 1.1 maybe. Slide down just a little bit. I don't know, maybe some, yeah, that looks pretty nice. So let's duplicate that down to the other side. And we'll drag to here. I'll line it up in the perspective view so that it looks centered pretty much. And let me duplicate one more to put on this wall. So I'll switch to rotation and drag out, rotate to duplicate the mesh. And then slide it over to the wall. You zoom in, make sure that this snaps nicely. There we go. And we need to take our scale down a little bit, maybe down to 1.5. Maybe even lower than that. Well, no, I don't know. 1.5 is nice. Looking good. And there we go. That adds a nice bit of detail to all of those walls. So we've got vents, we've got walls, and I think that's looking really nice for this room. Okay. And that leaves just one piece. There is a nice neon style sign that I want to add between the two rooms over this glass wall. So I want to jump into LT Deco one last time. And inside of LT Deco there should be a Leandri Research Complex sign, LRC sign 01. So let's grab that sign and drop it in right over these walls. So I'll add the sign. It's already oriented in the correct direction, so let's drag that down just a little bit. And let's see what view would be most useful. Probably the side view. And in order to get it centered up, let me grab just the frames and the sign itself. Show only those actors, so we get a nice clean view to center this up in. So maybe slide it down just a little bit. Maybe something like that would look nice. And let me also jump to a top view and slide this in so it's just almost at the center. Maybe a little bit off center would be alright, because I want to duplicate it around to the other side. Let me actually bring the glass meshes in as well. So we have the sign, and I have to go to the other side to select the glass meshes. So the glass, the two door frames, and the sign. We'll select all of those and show those actors. So now I get an idea of what it would look like if I duplicated it around to the other side. Because it's almost looking like I need to drop to a grid size of 4 to get it centered up. So let me turn my drag grid down to 4, snap it to the center, and then duplicate it by rotating 90 degrees and moving it over to the other side. And that's still a little bit too close. Let me move it out. There is centered, so that's looking nice. And let me bring all of the meshes back, deselect everything, and there we have a nice sign placed on the walls dividing the level.
Very nice.
And that's, I think, everything that we need for the decoration meshes for this level.
Okay, of course not including the decorations that are actually going to be the lights. So we've got more static meshes to add into this level, the static meshes that will represent the actual light fixtures, and we will start on that along with lighting in the next video. So that's going to wrap this video up. Thanks a lot.